My name is Fred Weisensee, and I'm one of the co-owners of Dancing Oaks Nursery, along with Leonard Foltz. And we are here in the rock garden right in the front of our home. And so when choosing the kind of garden style for around our home, fire resistance was a major consideration. And rock gardens, just by their having their rocky presence, are very low fire risk, and also their plants are much lower and not very woody. And many of them are succulent, and so they also don't burn well. So for this environment, we thought close to the house, a rock garden would be nice.
From the Oregon State University Extension Service, this is PolliNation, a podcast that tells the stories of researchers, land managers, and people like you who are making bold strides to improve the health of pollinators. I'm your host, Dr. Adoni Melathopoulos, Associate Professor of Pollinator Health in the Department of Horticulture. If you've traveled in higher elevation areas in Oregon, you know that there's some great pollinator landscapes that are found up in the rock gardens, in the well-drained rocky soils that we find in the high Cascades or in the Columbia Plateau Mountains. And you can bring this into your garden, as you can see in this garden here at Dancing Oaks Nursery, in the form of a rock garden. So in this episode, we're going to be talking with Fred at Dancing Oaks Nurseries about how you can have something like this wonderful rock garden. We're not going to be focusing only on native plants. There's some great exotic plants that will also work well in a pollinator rock garden. So this week on PolliNation, we're going to the rocks.
My name is Fred Weisensee, and I'm one of the co-owners of Dancing Oaks Nursery, along with Leonard Foltz. And we are here in the rock garden right in the front of our home. And so when choosing the kind of garden style for around our home, fire resistance was a major consideration. And rock gardens, just by their having their rocky presence, are very low fire risk, and also their plants are much lower and not very woody. And many of them are succulent, and so they also don't burn well. So for this environment, we thought close to the house, a rock garden would be nice. Plus, a rock garden looks very good around the house as well. It can really fit in and look very natural.
It looks like a lot of work, though.
Yes, it is a lot of work, and people can do it on their own if they want. We've used a professional to help us, partly because we don't really have the time to develop the necessary skills to do this kind of stonework, but also we are very busy, and the nursery takes a lot of time. So we would have to close the nursery to do this practically.
How old is this? How old is this rock garden?
This is its second year. And so last spring we planted most of it, and through the summer we kept planting things. We actually are always sneaking in new things. Through the winter it's also kind of an experiment to see what will do well in a rock garden. We're learning how some things may be doing too good and we're going to have to take them out, or they just didn't survive at all. This was a tough first winter for many of the plants because we had that very cold snap in mid-January, which killed some things.
Fred, let's go take a look.
Okay. Oregon sunshine grows over a large area of the western U.S., from Washington well into California, and so some of the varieties can vary quite a bit. As you can see, this Oregon sunshine has the same yellow daisy flowers, but the foliage is much more silvery, and they can be kind of a green silver or all the way to almost a white silver color. Baptisias are non-native plants that do very well in western Oregon. They come mostly from the Midwest or eastern U.S. They're in the legume family. They start blooming oftentimes in late April, and various varieties can bloom well into July. They can vary in color from white through the pinks and blues, and even a reddish brown color. They eventually can become quite drought tolerant. They're nitrogen fixing, and they also can vary a lot in their size. Some only getting to about 1.5 feet in size, some up to about 3 feet. And I think that most of them do quite well when they're established, not to necessarily water them much in the summer. They'll take water, but if they get too much water, then they will often splay and open up. These are very long-lived perennials. They could live 20, 30 years.
What kind of soil can they go into?
They could go into heavy clay, all the way into rock garden, well-drained soil. They're quite forgiving of a wide variety of soils.
Is this the full height?
For this one, now they can vary quite a bit. Some of them are much lower. Some are more in the 1.5 foot range. This is one of the taller ones, I would say. We're going to talk about Catherine DeMar, a very long-blooming penstemon that also is fairly forgiving. Here she's growing in a rock garden situation, which has very good drainage, very sunny, and the soil is fairly not very enriched. But also we have her growing in clay meadow areas, as long as she doesn't have too much competition. She's been blooming at least 4 to 6 weeks already, and will keep blooming probably another few weeks, and then we will shear her back, and then she'll start reblooming in about a month after that, until probably the end of summer.
And establishing penstemons.
Penstemons, if they're a species, they can be established by seed or by small plants that would be already potted. And I would say that most of them are going to establish best in the spring.
Oh, really? Not the fall?
Not the fall so much.
And so you need well-drained soils, but you said that some of these penstemons can take a little bit.
Yes, some are more forgiving with clay soils. I wouldn't say they would want it really wet during the summer. There could be some natives from the East Coast that would take that, but here, most of the Western penstemons would not tolerate that.
Tell us a little bit about how, in rough sense, what's underneath this, this rock wall? What's you talked about not enriched and well draining.
So the soils what you'd use as a substrate or soil for a rock garden needs to be fast draining. So it can have some regular soil, but it also needs to be amended with something like some sand, perhaps, some larger particles that are like pumice would also be good, or lava is another, crushed lava rock would be another possibility, or just some small sharp rocks would also be good. That would help add to drainage.
Tell us a little bit about the colors, the different kinds of penstemons that you can get. So this is one that's very forgiving, you were saying, that
Yes.
can be grown under a lot of conditions. But what else? What else is out there for gardeners to
There are many
plant?
penstemons. They can be colored everything from white through the pinks and blues to purples and reds. And there are even some that are probably very, almost black purple.
Oh, really? Wow.
Orange probably would be another possibility, definitely. Reds and oranges.
Is the growth habit always like this, kind of a spreading, cascading
I would
plant?
say that it's a pretty common sort of growth habit, but they can vary quite a bit. Some can, if they come from higher mountain areas, they can almost be like mats on the ground. As they get into richer soils, more benign climates than a mountain crag, then they could be taller and more upright. So it kind of depends where they come from. So many of the penstemons that we grow in the rock garden here and in the nursery are Western natives, but there are penstemons from the Midwest and South and East. And some of them may need similar conditions, good drainage, but some of them are more tolerant of wetter conditions. This penstemon here with the tubular orange flowers, really beloved by hummingbirds, is actually from Arkansas and probably southern Missouri. And here it is tolerating rock garden conditions, and I suspect it would probably tolerate a little heavier soil as well. So this small penstemon here, which is actually evergreen, is a good example of the penstemons that come from alpine areas. And this comes from alpine areas here in Oregon and then the West Coast. It's called the pink holly penstemon, and it can spread into kind of a mat. And it blooms fairly early, actually starting in April. This one has pink flowers, but they can also be more blue or almost purple, some of these evergreen alpine penstemons. They need good drainage, and so a rock garden is a good example, or something that is mounded that has a faster growing soil. They're also very drought tolerant.
Can you tell us a little bit about how to water penstemon? I imagine they must have deep roots.
I would say that the penstemons, once they're established, minimal. You want to make sure whatever watering regime you're doing, that they need to dry out between, because what could kill them is a constant wet for these alpine penstemons. Knowing where they come from makes a big difference in how you're going to treat them, and really the alpine ones really won't tolerate. Most of them are not going to really tolerate being constantly wet in a heavier soil. So this is an example of what's called goat's rue, or meadow rue is a better term, or thalictrum. Most of them we think of as more woodland plants, liking shade to part sun, but some of them do very well in full sun. And I've noticed it's many of the yellow flowering ones, such as this very tall thalictrum I'm seeing bloom for the first time. We were able to import it from Beth Chatto's nursery in England a couple of years ago, and here it is the first year that it's blooming. And I love the glaucous foliage, and then the really bright, soft blooms that make these like pom-poms at the very top.
How old is this plant?
These plants are probably about 3 years old.
Okay, and about them blooming once in a while.
They bloom in the late spring, early summer is their blooming period.
You were saying that this is the first time you've seen it bloom. Is that expecting it to bloom again?
Oh, yes. These are perennials.
Okay.
So they should bloom every year.
Water needs and soil needs?
This one seems to like pretty good drainage, and I'm not sure, it might do okay in clay, because this is the only place I've grown this particular variety. We have another variety that's very similar to this, and it has been very tolerant of clay soils. I imagine this one could also be very tolerant of clay soils as well, but we'd have to give it a try. One of my favorite spireas, which are usually small shrubs, some of them are native, but this variety is from Taiwan, and it's proven itself to be quite hardy here and quite adaptable. If it's in very rich soils, it'll get up to about 3 by 3 and can tolerate some shade. It can take clay soils, or it can be grown in the rock garden setting, where it tends to shrink it down somewhat, maybe to be like 1.5 by 1.5 feet. And I really like how it holds its leaves very close to its stems, which give it a very different look. And it does need a little water in the summer, so I wouldn't say that it's completely xeric. So a little water is going to make it thrive more. Many of you may have seen the Peruvian lilies in florist shops. They're excellent cut flowers, but they also do very well in the garden. They are all native to South America, and South America also has hummingbirds, even more varieties of hummingbirds than we have, and our hummingbirds very much love this plant. This particular variety, and many of the varieties, will start blooming in late May and will bloom all the way through until fall. And they often don't take a lot. They take a little summer water, but they don't necessarily take a lot of summer water. And they can vary quite a bit in color. They're usually not a pure color. They usually have some brushes of other colors, such as gold and oranges and reds are very common, sometimes some purple as well.
Is it a bulb? So
it's rhizomatous.
Okay.
So many people are very familiar with the Digitalis purpurea, which it's from Europe, but it does grow largely through all through Western Oregon, and it's a biennial. But there are many other Digitalis that are not naturalized here and are actually perennials. One of them being this one is the first time I'm seeing bloom, this Digitalis Georgiana from probably Eurasia, Asia Minor, Turkey, for instance. And it has dark stems and then these lighter colored flowers with a beautiful netting. And bees are often their pollinators. These also generally tend to be pretty drought tolerant as well.
Did you say it was a perennial?
It is.
Long-lived?
I don't know for sure.
And water requirements.
My experience has been that the perennial pen stems are long-lived. I mean, when I say long-lived, 10 years at least. And this is a low water need.
Thank you so much for listening. Show notes with links from each episode are available at the website pollinationpodcast.oregonstate.edu. I also love hearing from you, and there's a form at the website where you can pop in and say hello and give me feedback. If you want to support the show, remember to leave a rating on iTunes, Spotify, or whatever podcast mothership you use. And finally, if you have the means and you want to help support my lab's effort to document bee biodiversity in Oregon, visit OregonBeeAtlas.org and follow down to the donate button where you can make a tax-deductible donation to the Jerry and Judith Paul Native Pollinator Endowment. Every little bit helps. See you next episode.